Hello everyone, it's Jen, Scrapbena Creations. Today I'm creating a fun slimline scene card using the Unicorn Picnic stamp set from Lawn Fawn. This is from the newest release. I'm also going to bring in the older mini stamp set here called A Little Sparkle. I use the unicorn, but I also use the little fairies who are facing in opposite directions of the newest ones in the stamp, which is really fun. And I also brought in the picnic blanket from the Crazy Antics stamp set, which was also part of the newest release by Lawn Fawn. So we're going to jump into the coloring. I'm coloring today with my Ohuhu brush tip markers. Now, I recently purchased the 120 set. I'm loving them. I started out with the 72, and I do have a video on my personal opinion of these markers. I absolutely love the brush tip, and I'm so happy they came out with the 120 set. So I will have those linked below as well as everything else in the video, and you can grab the Ohuhu markers on Amazon. And for my Canadian friends, I also now have affiliate links to Amazon Canada, and that is below as well. So for the teal colors, I'm using BG5 as my darkest and BG4 as the lightest color. Now they are a little bit far apart from each other. So you saw there, I was just doing tip to tip technique where I was touching the lightest marker to the darkest tip of the marker. And that just gives me that middle shade. So for most of the coloring today, I'm doing a 2-color blend. Now for this pinky corally red color, I'm using R9 and R21. These are a lot closer together, so meaning that they blend better. So you can see that as I color them the first time here. So with these ones, I don't need to do the tip to tip, but I do want to have a little bit more of contrast. So I'm coming back in for a second layer with that darkest marker. And then with the lightest marker, I'm just kind of blending the darkest marker into that lightest, but still leaving a lot of that first coat of the lightest visible, if that makes sense. So when the markers are further apart, then I often do the tip to tip technique to get that middle color. When they're closer together and blend easier, then I often will go over a second time with the darkest and then blend that out with the lightest for a midtone, but leaving that lightest color from the first coat as a highlight. So I hope that makes sense. So we're quickly going through the yellows here. I use GY6 and GY73. So these are technically like a very pale lime green, but I think they work well for yellows. So that's the color combination I use there. For my chocolate, I'm using Y13 and Y12. And again, here's where I'm doing the tip to tip technique. That Y13 is quite a bit darker from the Y12, but once you just get a little bit of that darker ink on your lightest marker, it works beautifully for that mid-tone. For the cone, I'm using WG3 and WG01. And then for the white here, I am just going to use 2 colors, so the CG2 and the CG00, and then I will blend that out with the colorless blender, which is the 0 marker. So just adding on the unicorn the darkest highlights under the mane to the back of the tail and down that back side of the body, and then to the bottom of where her feet are laying and then where they're curled in on her belly. For the clouds and the white areas, I just wanted to do something a little bit different. So I decided to use the CG00 and then I brought in the R20, blended that out with the R19, and then used the colorless blender. So my clouds and the wings of the fairy and the unicorn horns will have a little bit of pink to them. So now that we have all the coloring, I'm going to go ahead and start on my background. So I'm using a Trinity Stamps Slimline die. So this gives me a scalloped rectangle, and it is 3.5 by 8.5. I've gone ahead and I've cut out all my images. Now, I only colored a few with you on screen. I colored multiple of these during the week and then cut some of them out by hand, but also used my brother scan and cut electronic cutting machine to cut out a lot of them as well. I will often fussy cut the larger images and then run the smaller ones through my scan and cut. So this video today is long for one card, but I kept in the process of how I make a scene card, because sometimes when you see more elaborate cards in terms of scene cards with lots of things on them, they can be intimidating, but also it may seem like they come together in no time. And this one took me a lot of fiddling with. So I wanted to leave that in for you today so you could just kind of see the process, like the entire process of how I go about to create a more elaborate scene card like the one I'm doing here today. So I'm using 3 of the longer clouds. This comes in the Unicorn Picnic stamp set. And then there's the blanket from the Crazy Antics, and I just colored that in the same 3 colors. So I wanted to keep the palette fairly simple in terms of the number of colors and the number of markers that I used. So I just repeated that tealy aqua, the corally pink, and the green yellow for all of my coloring. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue this cloud and the blanket and the 2 unicorns together here to kind of make one piece. And then I went ahead and added some foam tape on the back of that. I'll do the same now with the little cluster here of images that I'm going to have on the left side of the card. And once I get those in place, I'll glue down the blanket and the cloud to the left. And then I'm going to pop up the little unicorn on the left-hand side. So I'm just varying my dimension here just to give some added interest to this scene. Now for the panel, I just used my slimline die there that I showed you from Trinity Stamps, and I cut it out of some Heavy Doodle Tealicious cardstock. This is my favorite color of cardstock. And I didn't do anything to the background. I knew that this card was going to be very busy. There's a lot on it. And so I wanted to keep that background very simple. But if you wanted to create a background, you could simply cut the background die out of some white cardstock, and you could blend on some ink with a cloud stencil, and I think that would look really cute as well. But I really wanted a darker background, so all of these white images would really pop from the background. So as I'm talking here, you can see I'm just starting to lay out all of the little picnic foods, and how cute are these? The sundae filled with ice cream with chocolate sauce, and the slice of cake. There's a donut. There's an ice cream cone as well, which you will see here in a second. And then also the little sprinkle jar, which is really cute. I added that to the cluster there to the right-hand side. Now, once I have those main areas complete, I'm going to start working on filling the upper portion of my card here. So I wanted to have 2 of the little fairies carrying that big ice cream cone to the right-hand side. And so to balance out those clouds, I thought I would add a cloud behind them. The next fairy I have is holding a spoon over the sundae, which I think is really sweet. And then I've added some additional fairies and their little sweet treats as well. But you can see here I'm playing around. I didn't like having them laid out the way I did the first time. So it's constantly just kind of playing with things and seeing what appeals to your eye. I eventually took that little fairy off with the donut, although she does make an appearance at the end of the card, and decided instead to fill in that gap with my sentiment. So I'm going to use the sentiment, "You're magical," and I'm just going to stamp that out with my Versafine Clair Nocturne ink. Just making sure that I let that ink settle on to the cardstock before lifting up my stamp block there. And then I can go ahead and continue to add my little fairies. So I'm going to have the little fairy with the ice cream cone to the left. And you may have noticed I colored the fairies. I have them in a lighter fair skin tone, and for that I just use one marker. I use the R18. For the darker skin tone on the fairies, I used BR2, and I love how they came out. So going ahead and just adding that cloud and the fairies to the left-hand side. Now, I was conscious here of the scallops to the side of the cards. Normally, I will have images hanging off of my cards, in particular clouds, because it kind of gives that illusion of movement. And so I had thought about doing it with the larger clouds where the unicorns are having their picnics, but thought better against it. But you're going to see here, as I start filling out my scene, I do go ahead and add some of the clouds off of the card panel, and I run into a bit of trouble. First though, I've gone ahead and I've added the spoon to the sundae bowls. I just colored those with the CG2, so again, just one marker. They're not prominent on the card, so I didn't feel like I had to do a lot of color blending for such a small image. So here's where I'm trying to fill out the rest of my scene, and I'm going to adhere some of those clouds off. Now, I went to cut these, and I don't know if you can tell, but I actually went too far. So I cut this first one, and I can see the teal cardstock underneath. So I tried to move it over with my finger. It didn't work. I ended up having to peel that off carefully. I added another cloud, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to trim these off camera. It was just easier for me to have it closer to me as opposed to trying to have it on camera and making sure that I get those scallops cut out nicely. I do like the way it turned out. It was a little bit fussy to do that, but it does give you that movement. And so I will actually add another cloud to the bottom right hand of that cloud that's furthest to the edge of the card. Right hand. Did I say left hand? I don't even know anymore. But you'll see that at the end. I do that off screen as well. So here I just felt like I needed something to the bottom. I may have gone a little bit overboard here, but I had so many images cut and colored, and I just really wanted to create a fun scene full of these adorable little images. So I started off with the fairy, and I think it was the donut, and I had her with the spoon first, and I just thought it looked funny because she wasn't close enough to the sundae. Tried it with the donut and ended up going with the little ice cream cone, and I do like that a lot. I'm going to add the fairy with the donut up here by the sentiment, and I do end up adding another little fairy and a donut over to the right hand side, and I did that off screen after I thought I was done filming. But sometimes these scene cards, you just kind of keep playing. So for some final touches, I added some white gel pen just to add some highlights. I'm using my Lawn Fawn glitter pen for the unicorn's hair and for the little horn on the unicorn and the fairy wings. Then I decided to bring in my Nuvo Dream Drops in, they're called Fairy Wings, which is kind of coincidental for this card. And as an afterthought, I decided to bring in my Nuvo Shimmer and just cover the clouds with that as well. It probably would have been smarter to do that before I put down the Dream Drops around the edges of those clouds, but it worked just fine. Here I'm adding some Trinity Stamps Star Confetti, and that I feel like filled in all of that extra space really nicely. So just going to add this to my card base. I did trim it down a little bit smaller than 3.5 by 8.5, and you can see the little fairy here that I added to the right hand side and that cloud. So that finishes up our unicorn card for today. I hope you enjoyed this card. I love making slimline. Let me know if you are following that trend and really enjoying creating them. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a fantastic day and I'll see you soon. Bye.